GM is at a crossroads. As one of America's most storied and oldest automakers, it's working to stay ahead of the curve amid electrification shifts and mounting tariff challenges. The company, number 18 on the Fortune 500, must evolve fast enough to compete with tech-driven newcomers and global rivals, yet remain disciplined enough to protect a legacy business that still generates the bulk of its revenue. Today, we're talking to Shilpan Amin, Global Chief Procurement and Supply Chain Officer at GM, about what it takes to bring a startup mentality to a global automaker, how he's thinking about the future of EVs, and the ways GM is preparing the workforce for an AI-driven era.
Are you ready to nurture what's next? Reimagine industries to turn bold ambition into the beginning of everything. What's your next brilliant move? McKinsey & Company.
Shilpan Amin, Global Chief Procurement and Supply Chain Officer at GM. Thank you so much for joining us on Fortune Next to Lead.
Well, thank you for having me.
Delighted to have you. And I want to jump in by discussing your career arc. Staying at one company for nearly 3 decades is incredibly uncommon. I don't mean to age you, but it is incredibly uncommon today, especially while continuing to ascend. I looked at your bio. It means every 3 years at maximum, you were in the same position before moving on to the next one. What kept you at GM through so many turning points, not only in the company, but also the industry at large?
It's funny when you say that out loud, because I remember coming into the company and you'd meet someone and they'd say, they'd introduce themselves and I've been here for 20 years. And I kept thinking, you'd stay at the same company for 20 years. And here I am almost 30 years in. It's just been a great ride along the way. General Motors provides so many opportunities to do different things. And I think this evolution we've gone through to help transform the auto industry, it's really exciting. And I've learned along the way. We've had some great leaders along the way to help guide me. And, it's just a fun place to be.
It's interesting you say it's been a great ride, literally and figuratively,
Yes, exactly.
Given the fact that it's an automaker. Let's dig in a little bit more there. I mean, what mindset or discipline do you believe helped you to stay upwardly mobile, especially in such a large and complex organization?
It wasn't natural. If I left it to where I wanted to progress in my career, I wouldn't have opened doors to different opportunities and the ability to think more broadly across the company. It's because I had strong mentors. And one example, I started my career in engineering and spent my first about 12 years in different parts of engineering. And I had a mentor reach out to me and say, global purchasing and supply chains doing some unique things globally that we may be able to learn as engineers. We need to build the relationship between the two functions. Maybe you should go try that out. And I actually said no. And then, and he didn't bother me. And then a couple of months later, he approached me again and said, hey, just maybe you should reconsider. Is that something you're interested in? And so, of course, he asked again. So I went and talked to a couple of peers of engineers, and they said, why would you ever do that? You're doing great in engineering. And finally, he asked me for a third time because he just did a rotation back from purchasing. And he said, I've learned a lot along the way. I'm a better engineer and a leader because of my experience there. And he said, this isn't a tell. I'm not going to even ask you again. But I'm only saying this because there's a leader there that wants to talk to you. Are you willing to do a one-on-one? And as much as I knew I wasn't going to go to purchasing, I went and met this leader. And within the first 5 minutes of meeting her, I thought, I want to work for her. And what I recognized was strong leaders can motivate and inspire you to do a lot of great things. And I went there. It was supposed to be a 2-year rotation. I stayed 10 years in global purchasing and supply chain because I loved it so much, not realizing how much fun I would have. And I think because it brought my skills together of bridging the relationship between engineering and purchasing, and to be honest, extending that relationship out to the supply base, it fit into, the way I like to lead behind relationships matter.
Many executives, they struggle to build influence beyond their immediate function. Yet you've consistently kind of earned trust across engineering, purchasing, as you already alluded to, operations. Now you're in corporate leadership. How do you intentionally cultivate that cross-organizational credibility and get that buy-in?
Yeah. One of the reasons I was concerned about moving to purchasing at the time was um, not realizing how the organization worked and what they were trying to accomplish. And when I went to purchasing, I quickly realized all the people within General Motors are trying to bring the company up and do what's right for the company. And sometimes we weren't just speaking the same language because we didn't connect into how to enable each other to be successful. That became one of those differentiators of how do you knit an organization together by creating experiences together, building those relationships so you understand each other. And that was actually a drive-in motivator for me to experience different parts of the
So how
organization.
do you do that?
It starts with going and experience and trusting and empowering, and really then connecting into how do we enable someone else's success before you ask for support that you may need from those functions.
I'm curious how much of your ascension story is people seeing the end result or what you're executing on and tapping you, and how much of it stems for you from you and you saying, "Okay, I'm ready for the next thing. I want to stretch myself. Let's get after it."
I think some of what builds a personal brand is um, how do you create environments for everyone to be successful? And so I'm a big focus around culture. And everyone knows, to me, culture matters. Culture is actually more important than measuring results, because I'm a believer if you create a strong culture and an environment where everyone can bring their best self to work, the results will come. In fact, the results will exceed anyone's expectations. And what I've tried to do in all the roles I've had is create this environment, create a culture that allows us to do great things, which then helped me lean into where's the most troubling parts of the company and how do I lean in to bring a culture that helps the same team achieve different results and results that they couldn't even imagine.
You define good culture, or a culture that is able to foment good, solid results as what?
Yeah.
How do you characterize that?
So it's seeing people's skills not with the title they bring to the table, not with career experiences they have, but really seeing it as, and I learned this from Mary Barra,
Your
around
CEO.
our
Yeah.
CEO, around, when you come to the table, when you're at a meeting, you need to drop your titles and roles at the door. Everyone comes with a unique perspective and experience, and you have to have a voice clear enough to help those that are making decisions collect all those perspectives and make a better and informed decision. And when you lead by not a title, but rather creating that environment, we were able to make decisions quicker. We were able to take more risk. And because everyone felt valued and that they were contributing to the whole business results versus their functional results, it was a whole different level of engagement.
What's interesting about your role is it's one that is quite horizontal. I mean, it touches on every aspect and every function of GM. I think that political capital is one of the least discussed, but often most decisive factors in corporate advancement. What is something that you have learned about navigating power plays and alignment inside a global enterprise? Something that you wish rising leaders would understand earlier, that even you would have understood earlier?
So some of it is caring about how people feel. And so the story I actually tell new employees to the company that they'd be surprised about is, there was a time where I felt I was going to be let go from the company. I thought I
How
was
early
doing,
was this in your
this
career?
was probably within the first 10 years of the company. I was launching my first product on the engineering side in a role when I went from chassis engineering to interior engineering. So I was uncomfortable with it. And I thought I was doing great things. We were on a path to success. And one of the things I might not have been doing effectively is communicating with the different functions of what engineering was contributing for the success of that launch. And because of that, it was creating anxiety in other parts of the organization. And there was a leader in manufacturing that came to me and said, I was actually on a path to ask you to leave. But after I realized what you were able to accomplish, because you now have communicated it, I recognize how you're actually contributing to the company. And that really stuck with me from two elements. One, no one asked me, and I took it upon myself that I need to make sure I communicate more. But on the second thing, of I need to be able to communicate to others where they could do better and improve for everyone in the room. And sometimes you have to go through those experiences to be able to help define what you don't want to make people feel and help them bring their best to work.
Their best selves to the table. You've been promoted in environments that have been defined by disruption from EV shifts, global crises, certainly cultural transformation. What did you do differently during these inflection points that you think positioned you for the next step? Anything immediately come to mind?
It's really how you behave in those difficult times. Because you do see anxiety rise across the entire organization when these drastic crises happen. And so it starts with making sure everyone calms down. Let's get together. We'll figure this out, and give people confidence that, there's things that we could achieve together that we can't imagine today. The second part of it is, again, collectively bring in the right people together to start ideating around different perspectives and how we can do things different. And then I think the third part is having a leadership team that trusts and empowers you. And so when I came into the role, the prior time I ran purchasing and supply chain, a week into the role, we had a strike. And coming out of that strike, we started seeing the elements of COVID as China shut down and then Korea and Japan shut down. And, that affects our ability to produce. And one of the things we talked about is you have to have a metrics where it's not zero lost units, because that wasn't realistic. What we said is if we're at our best, we'll be the last ones down and the first ones up, meaning we will figure out how to get one more part than anyone else, and we will be able to find alternative material before anyone else to close the bridge of when you're impacted. And that became a motivating factor for everyone, that if when we did go down, you didn't feel demotivated because we were the last ones down. And we were the first ones up because it continued to inspire people to keep trying, because we still have a goal to achieve.
Yeah. One of the examples you gave was the importance or the criticality of having the right people at the table. So one question I always love to ask is, how do you hire? What skills are you looking for? What mindsets, what habits? What are you looking for when you're hiring your direct team?
So there's a couple of key skills I want leaders at the table to have. One, being bold. They've got to be comfortable enough not to sense what the room wants you to hear, but actually sense what they need to hear. And there was actually a case study when I was doing my executive program at Stanford that really stuck out, that helped me realize the softest voice in the room can have the largest impact to a decision. And if you don't create an environment where they feel safe to have and speak up on their perspective, you'll miss that opportunity. And so we need people that are comfortable with healthy tension, debate, negotiation, and continue to share their perspective, even if the rest of the room feels differently. And then when we get all those perspectives and we make a decision, we're all on board to move forward fast.
Are you a debater?
I love to debate, actually. And sometimes I debate, and I tell my team this openly. I'll actually share a perspective I don't believe in, just to make sure all views are thought of. So sometimes it's a test to make sure if I sense that they're actually leaning to a bad idea I'm throwing on the table, they're not bringing their views to the table, and I'll reset them into, is that truly what you believe, and why?
You play devil's advocate to essentially
Yes.
break through that echo chamber.
That's it.
You've led GM's international operations, which I presume gives you this geopolitical and cultural and commercial vantage point that I at least find few executives these days, or near executives, experience. What's one lesson from running those diverse markets that fundamentally has reshaped how you think, how you lead, especially for a global company?
I think that same concept of the softest voice in the room might have the largest impact on the decision also applies to the size of markets that we do business in. And often in the past, it was about, we create things here at headquarters at General Motors, and then we tell the rest of the world, how to actually apply them. And we weren't taking lessons from the markets in reverse to make headquarters better. And so it was a cultural shift, but to engage different cultures in the world. And I think it helps I'm the son of two Indian immigrants. My parents came in from India, and they were big travelers, and so we've experienced different cultures as I grew up, and so you recognize you have to adapt to cultures, and that's how it brings their best self out.
That's an interesting point you make in that you said historically it had been Detroit first, disseminated to the rest of the world, and then you made this flip where you're localizing it and bringing it back to headquarters. Can you give a for instance in that regard?
Yeah, so there were some go-to-market strategies that we were doing because we had to be lean and efficient in a lot of these markets, where we got creative ways of, how do you actually market to the community in an efficient way and be more targeted. There were things that we did in how we restructure businesses around the world to
For
stay lean.
instance,
And so, like South America, and South America was a business that was struggling. A lot of their direction came from the headquarters, and it wasn't effective within the market. And when we realized what the customer there truly wants and built relationships with our dealers there, we recognized we had to adjust the portfolio that we had there. We had to adjust how we go to market there and engage the customer there. And it was a big part of the turnaround into the market. And one of the things we did to just market to the customer, WhatsApp was big there. So we started targeted marketing through WhatsApp, and all of a sudden it became a huge way to engage our customers, and it had a strong turn rate into selling vehicles. And it was a very lean and efficient way to market.
that's interesting. So with South America in particular, it was how do you market and what do they want from a marketing perspective, less so than what do they want from a car's perspective.
Yes.
Okay.
But even on the product
Yeah.
side, like in the Middle East, we started learning around where people value some of our
Mhm.
accessories and capabilities. And like just even having a fridge in the vehicle,
Oh.
because you're in the desert, how
Right.
critical
I
it
mean, Dubai
was.
gets hot.
Very hot.
Riyadh gets hot.
And so we actually brought that idea back to the product teams here, and it became a key feature for everyone around the world.
Great anecdote. I want to talk about, marine electrification because this is just super fascinating. Your work on electrifying the marine sector goes well beyond traditional automotive responsibilities. When you think GM, you think cars, big cars. What convinced you that GM should explore a space that's kind of far from its core, at least as an outsider looking in, as electric pontoon boats? Like what you have like a 25% stake in pure watercraft. It just seems quite unconventional when you think about GM. Walk us through the decision making there.
So there were two elements of it. So I did my MBA back in 2001 to 2003, earlier in my career, and it was at USC, and I did a concentration on entrepreneurship. And there was a lot of people that thought, oh, so you're going to venture off and do your own thing. And I had no intention to. I loved the corporate environment. I loved what General Motors provides with opportunities. But what I wanted to bring back was, and this is during the dot-com era, how do you actually create an entrepreneurial mindset within a corporate environment? In fact, that's kind of what my thesis was at the end. And at the time, I wanted to apply it. I didn't know how. And what reset that was when I did my executive program at Stanford, the whole concept of design thinking and reversing how you think about customer pain points and then how do we solve for those. And we recognize we have core capabilities in the company that could be applied more broadly than the automotive. And it actually helps the automotive when you can scale with more volume some of the core investments that we're making. And in this case, it was we're investing heavily in the electrification propulsion systems, whether it's batteries and drive units, and then it becomes applicable into different industries around the world. And when we came back, there was a group of us that went through the Stanford program together that created a venture team within our propulsion organization to start fostering ideas from the team. And then we would actually fund some of those ideas, more of a think tank. And what it did was inspire people to then be more innovative in the core work that they were doing, not necessarily the disruptive work that we were funding.
Follow up to that because I think large companies, they often struggle with speed. They often
Yeah.
struggle with experimentation. So what's the leadership lesson for you from trying to run that kind of startup style venture within GM, again, a massive company, and also a legacy enterprise that's structurally designed for scale and stability?
Yeah. I think, again, you create these environments where people become a lot more comfortable with ambiguity. Traditionally, we needed to make sure we understood everything with a level of precision that wasn't necessary, which took time before we even started. And when you get to a mindset that we should get started because our premises say this is the direction we should go, and we'll adjust along the way. And by the time you realize exactly what you need, you're 2 years ahead of waiting for that exact precision before you start. And so we've done a lot of programs with some of the fastest development cycles we've seen in the industry. For example, our GMC Hummer EV came out in under 2 years from start to production. That's unheard of in the auto industry. We did it with our Cadillac Lyriq. And even how we react to today with a lot of the crisis we see in the supply chain, we try and get one step ahead. We move quickly. And because of that, we've been able to go through this year with zero disruptions at a time that there's been multiple crises, whether it's heavy rare earth elements or now with the Nexperia chips. We've had zero impact to the company.
Do you consider yourself someone who's able to navigate ambiguity well?
I attempt to. There's always opportunities to do better. It does take you out of your comfort zone.
Well, how do you make decisions when you don't have all the answers? When the lines are blurred, how do you make decisions especially for the long term?
So I think it connects into what I mentioned before around making sure you communicate. So let everyone know what assumptions we have and what's leading us to given a direction. So if those assumptions change, people recognize when we have to pivot. And then take in what you do know and set in a direction immediately instead of waiting, because you could get in this paralysis of, trying to analyze every option and never moving forward.
Let's quickly talk about crisis leadership and kind of these battlefield promotions, because you've navigated GM through some of the more turbulent moments of supply chain history, natural disasters, global shortages, especially as we saw during and post pandemic. Is there a single quote unquote, maybe not crisis, but challenge that fundamentally changed the way you think about resiliency and leadership?
We have historically spent a lot of time around risk management and the things that we can control. So we'll run through scenarios where if this happens, how would we react? What started coming into play back in COVID, and then when the semiconductor crisis of 2021 started happening, where there's factors that are beyond our control. And so how do you think about things differently from a resilience standpoint? Because sustaining operations, changing our mindset to how much does it cost for a part to how much does it cost not to have a part when plants go down and your structural costs continues to burn. And so that mindset shift said, how do you set up a supply chain operations and what we engage in differently? The second part of it was all about relationships. And so the semiconductor crisis, for example, we bought 0 semiconductors in 2021 directly. It was all done through our tier ones. We didn't even know where wafers come from, where back-end processing is done. And all of a sudden, when we started pointing into how much is concentrated in different locations, it really told us we've got to establish those direct relationships. We've got to help, first of all, reduce the complexity because that was causing part of their issue. And then we have to have more direct ownership so we could mitigate these risks moving forward.
Yeah. During these various strings of or periods of volatility, was there ever a specific moment when you thought to yourself, if I handle this well, my entire career trajectory changes?
No, I never had even this role in any of my career development planning cycles. And we have these career development tools where you talk about where your end goal is. And I've shifted from what titles and roles I have into what experiences and contributions I could give. And as long as I'm finding...
That sounds too altruistic.
But I'll be honest, when I was out in LA doing my MBA, it would have been easier to join a .com. It would have been easier to figure out how to stay in LA. LA's got great weather. We were right on the beach. And it was, again, this opportunity at General Motors to make a difference. And I think under Mary's leadership, where we've taken a traditional company and we've brought in a senior leadership team that really fosters around being innovative, being agile, pushing the limits on our capabilities. It really fit into what fulfills my purpose. And so then it doesn't matter what role and title you have, as long as you're contributing to the things that you want to contribute, which gets back to how do you bring an entrepreneurial mindset into a corporate environment.
Yeah, impact over title. Let's talk about the EV transition. I mean, what are your top priorities as GM rebuilds that supply resilience after the shocks of tariffs, after the pandemic, after the semiconductor shortages? Where does that lead you?
So I think a couple of things. We started out when we were developing what our EV future was. Um, Back in 2000 and 2021, sorry, in 2020 and 2021, um, first thing we thought of is this is a whole new environment on things that we're going to start buying and engaging in that we never have in the past. Like we never looked at mines of extraction of lithium and how do you process them and then how do you actually assemble them into cells and modules and into packs. And we realized though it becomes a core capability that you've got to start learning early on. Even on our drive units, which started into, we have a higher reliability reliance on heavy rare earth elements. And so it matters if you want to be able to produce vehicles and to establish in a more resilient supply chain for the heavy rare earths, which is why in 2021, we started establishing relationships with MP Materials and VAC here in the United States for our United States production. And at the time, no one else was doing it. And if you look around and you wait
Could you
for
see the writing on the wall at the time?
it was for different reasons at the time. It was more about if this was going to grow quickly, we need to be able to control our destiny. And if with supply demand volatility, you want to have equity stake to control, to keep vehicles affordable. And the whole motivating factor is how do you create affordable EVs that can bring technology to the market, but at an affordable price point. And these were the strategic elements that were important to do that. Now, when you fast forward, there's other reasons for BN to have those relationships, including geopolitical tension and controls that are out there, tariff mitigation that's out there. And so in 2021, no one was thinking of either of those except General Motors. Now you realize if we didn't start that in 2021 and other people are now taking advantage of those establishments that we helped start, everyone would be behind and we'd be exposed even more.
I'm going to circle back to, that rare earth discussion in just a bit. I do just want to lean in a little bit more on the EV talk because I'm hearing this growing talk of EV fatigue among consumers. And it seems like the industry is kind of retreating from these once bold and ambitious targets and rewriting them. So do you still believe that EVs will power the future of GM and GM's portfolio? And if so, what does that mean for future procurement? How are you thinking about that? What's the impact for you?
So we've always said the path to an all EV future will not be linear, and no one can predict the true timing of when that happens. Our focus has always been at General Motors of you create great products with great experiences, and the consumer will tell you if they're delighted by those. And so we started even from the beginning. We knew to take full advantage of an EV, it had to be a ground up architecture to take advantage of how people feel in the vehicle, the spacing that they have, the technology you bring into it. And so it took us a little longer, but we created a whole new architecture. And then we wanted a breadth of choices out there. So, we brought in over 11 EVs to the market for, Alfred Sloan at one time said for every person purpose. And so that still holds true that we want to create a product for all the customers out there. And the volumes of that, the trajectory of the volumes were driven from a regulatory standpoint, yes. The products themselves were centered around what customers love. And so we became the fastest growing EV company. We're, number 2 positioned in the market with our EVs and growing number 1 in Canada. And, we're not putting the heavy discounts others are to sell the products because when you actually experience it, you realize it makes a difference. And I've been driving an EV and now when I go into a combustion engine vehicle, I feel like I've taken a step back in time. I've gone back to a flip phone versus, a smartphone.
Yeah. What are you driving?
A Cadillac Lyric.
There you go.
Yes.
What keeps you up at night?
I'm not a social media person. Find myself waking up and seeing what was tweeted the night before because everything seems to affect supply chains nowadays. And, that geopolitical tension globally, plays a factor because we still have this mantra that be the first to know and first to react. And so what we try and do is keep that pulse of what's happening around the world. We've actually built AI tools behind this of how do you map out the suppliers around the world and overlay it with what's happening in those places around the world. And so we monitor 200,000 news articles daily through AI to say, is there something there that could influence and impact the flow of materials around the world so we can get ahead of it? Because every hour, every minute will matter for us to be able to ensure we have secured
Let's delve
operations.
deeper into that.
Yes.
AI, how are you leveraging it?
As I mentioned, like it becomes this efficient tool as an extension of the capabilities of our buyers and our logistics buyers around being better informed and to better react. And to be honest, we extend that capability to our supply base. So supply chain mapping, for example, where we can look down, to dirt and water. And if you can see a fire happening somewhere in the world, we can go up that value chain and tell our tier ones immediately, we need an alternative plan for this because it's about to hit you. It might not hit you for 2 weeks, but it's coming, and which means it's going to hit us in 3 weeks. 3 weeks is a ton of time if you can get ahead of it, in supply chain risk mitigation.
I want to make it clear why that matters to our audience. Let's say 10 years ago, 15 years ago, would you have been able to get ahead of it in that same manner? How long would it have taken you if you could have gotten ahead of it?
It would have taken the communication of that situation and that company knowing where their parts go to and where does those parts go to. And, some of these are at the 7th level of purchases in the supply chain. So by the time it gets to the top level, it's too late. The supply chain has caught up to them. Parts aren't at their dock already, and you're going to take a shutdown before you could react. Now, for example, our supply base has had over 70 different fires this year. In the past, that would have been a significant amount of downtime in our plants.
We're
We've had
talking
zero downtime
3 months,
today.
6 months?
Depending on how extensive there is. I mean, you're seeing it right now with one of the aluminum suppliers in New York, that's causing downtime at some of the OEMs. And being able to look ahead and seeing some of those and react quicker than anyone else can has allowed us to have zero disruptions.
I want to lean into the human side of automation. I'm curious how GM is preparing its workforce from the factory floor, certainly to procurement, for this more data-driven and AI-driven future and AI-driven supply chain.
For me, it's about creating the experiences that people understand it. Because if you sit there and try and explain it, even for me, it was difficult to understand why do I even have to spend time on this, and then you can easily say, look, it's not capable because it's not achieving the results that we can achieve now. When you refocus it to say your time is more valuable, instead of processing this paperwork, instead of going and seeking out all this information, but finding solutions or building partnerships or driving innovation for the company and redirecting your time to something that's more valuable to the company, it allows people to realize how they're being held back because of more of the transactional work that can be done through AI. And at the same time, you have to have the tools within AI to demonstrate that, and we're able to help relieve you of that today. And so it's been really effective. There's one thing we're deploying right now that it was taken 80,000 people hours of our buyers to process something that added zero value. And it was purely paperwork of change management in the system. And now you can have AI actually run those processes and process those where you spend zero time on it, where now your time is now, especially in a crisis mode where most of your days focus on finding alternatives, you actually have the time to do it effectively. Make a difference each and every day.
Let's end here. As you look to the future, what's next for this industry? What are you seeing in the crystal ball that gets you excited?
So this whole path to a personal autonomous vehicle will be game changing. And so I drive a vehicle with Super Cruise. Super Cruise is our hands-off driver assist technology. And I have two boys that we used to drive them. They were playing travel soccer. So I'd be dead tired on a Friday night, come home, and we'd have to drive 5 hours to play in, from Detroit to Cleveland, Ohio, or to, Chicago. And the whole time in the car, I was just focused on getting us there. And my kids are there, my wife's there. And when we got to the hotel, all the parents are there, and I'd go to the room and sleep. What driver assist and Super Cruise has provided me personally is a time to re-engage with those around me. So in the car ride, because I am paying attention to the road, but I'm not worried about the road because I trust the system that's in there, I'm having conversations back with the kids and the family around how their days were. And by the time I get to the destination, I have enough energy to engage with those around me. And when people realize you're getting time back and the ability to re-engage and not be exhausted, that's priceless. You take that now to, we announced that we're going to eyes off driver assistant, which is on that path to true personal autonomous vehicles. You're getting your time back. And I think GM's at a leading edge to be able to do that safely. And we have a team in place to continue to develop that technology. So it's exciting. It'll be a transformation unlike anything we've seen until back from horse and cart to combustion engine.
I mean, imagine the productivity gains during one's commute back and forth, or even after a few glasses of wine
Exactly.
when you want to get home, and you certainly don't want to be behind a wheel.
For sure, yes.
Yeah.
So I'm super excited about
That'll be a fun one, certainly for us to watch at Fortune. Well, we'll end here. Shilpan, thank you so much for your time. This has been a really fun conversation, so thank you.
Thank you for the conversation. I enjoyed it.
Likewise.
This is a preview file.